1919 was an auspicious year in history. The First World War ended, ushering a drastic change in the world order. The Philippine Islands had been a U.S. territory for 2 decades and was promised independence under the Jones Law of 1916. Progressive reformers saw the country and its people as a major target for modernization, and education was its main weapon. 7 forward-looking Filipinas came together in 1919 to create a school where young women could gain the knowledge and skills that would make them modern women. Paz Marquez Benitez was the first president of the Philippine Women's College. Jose Abad Santos was its first chairman of the Board of Trustees. Francisca Tirona Benitez was the second president, and with her husband Dean Conrado, guided the school from a house on A. Flores Street to its iconic Taft Avenue campus. In 1932, the college became a university, making PWU the first university for women in Asia founded by Asians. It provided a space where innovations in education flourished, and young people were encouraged to be the best that they could be. For over 100 years, the Philippine Women's University has been known as a leader in quality education. In 1934, PWU moved into its main campus on Taft Avenue, and since the 1970s has been co-educational. Located in the heart of Metro Manila, it is easily accessible by public transport and surrounded by affordable housing. Today's PWU offers undergraduate and graduate courses in several fields of study. Its business and management programs are responsive to the needs of industry, using evolving technology for global competence. PWU graduates excel in arts and sciences, education, social work, and diplomacy. Its fine arts and music programs have produced outstanding graduates through a holistic education that treasures heritage as well as excellence. PWU has pioneered in fields such as food science, nutrition and dietetics, medical technology, pharmacy, and nursing. PWU continues to play an essential role in producing graduates who possess the skills that make them competitive in the country and anywhere in the world.
Mabuhay! Good morning to everyone. I am Angela Lucena, your host for this morning's activity. Before we start our program, may I mention some of our house rules for today. If you have any questions, you may use our chat box or our comment sections below. And lastly, don't forget to fill out the evaluation form that will be given at the end of our program. In the Philippines, nursing profession is recognized by people with high regard and respect. However, the salary, benefits, and privileges does not compensate the overwhelming duties and responsibilities of the nurses. It's been so long that nurses are requesting and even lobbying to the government to increase the salary, but still to no avail. With the new groups of nurses who will be graduating and looking for a job, salary will be one of the bases for accepting the offer of employment. Today's webinar will inform all of us as the status of the salary standardization here in the Philippines. The objectives are the following. For the participants to know the current status of the plight of nurses on salary standardization, to understand the reason why the government is adamant to implement salary standardization, and to be updated on the plan of action of the Philippine Nurses Association on the stand of the government. To formally start our program, may I ask Ms. Hazel Shanko to lead the prayer, and may I invite everyone to sing the national anthem to be followed by the PW hymn.
Let's bow our head and put ourselves in the presence of the holiness of God. Dear Lord, we are grateful for your steadfast love. We thank you for your faithfulness and guidance. Forgive us in our sins. We humbly request you today to bless our speaker with your greatest inspiration to share the most of his knowledge to his respective topic. We ask that you guide all the committees in charge so that they can carry out their duties responsibly and achieve the goals they have set. Your infinite blessings would imply the success of this webinar. May we be living witnesses of your genuine love through the application of knowledge and understanding from this activity. Your protection and sufficient grace will always abide us. In Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. Amen.
Ms. Christine Caballero will welcome all the participants for this. Miss Christine Caballero will welcome all the participants for this morning's webinar.
Dr. Celeste Di Maculagan, the webinar advisor, our guest speaker who will be formally introduced later, faculty members, nurses, students, friends, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to all of you and a warm welcome as we open today's webinar. The Plight of Filipino Nurses towards Salary Standardization. Is there light at the end of the tunnel? It is an exceptional morning, for today we will hear our guest speaker as he updates us on what is the status of his advocacy, the salary standardization of nurses in the Philippines. On the health situation of all the people in the world, everybody realizes the great service of nurses as one of the frontliners. They risk their own lives as they continuously render high quality and safe care to all COVID-19 patients. They report to duty without fail and do their job diligently. With everything that they are doing to save lives, are they well compensated in terms of salary, hazard pay, and other benefits? This is the question that most of the nurses are asking up to this very moment. Filipino nurses have been requesting and pleading to the government officials and owners of private hospitals to raise their salary, but it always ends in vain. With renowned nurses, like our guest speaker for today, this topic has been his advocacy for quite some time. And this morning, we will learn from him on the status of what he is fighting for. We, therefore, renew our welcome, particularly for those who have joined us on Facebook Live. We wish you all a pleasant and fruitful stay.
To introduce the guest speaker, may I call on Miss Rene Rose Padilla.
Ladies and gentlemen, our guest speaker for this morning is an alumnus of Manila Central University for both Basic and Master of Arts in Nursing. After passing the local board examination for nurses, he landed a job at BA Hospital Incorporated at May Kawayan, Bulacan. Years pass by as he ascends to the top of the nursing ladder, that of being a chief nurse in 2000 and as a nurse consultant in 2002. Embarking into a different field in nursing, this time as an educator, he started as a clinical instructor in his alma mater and was assigned to supervise students at AFPMC and Caloocan Health Department. Again, going up the ranks as a nurse educator is but an interesting journey for him, until he reached the topmost position of being the Dean of Manila Central University, which he holds up to this moment. Furthermore, his interest is to be of service to a larger population of nurses. At present, he is the chairperson on Committee on Chapter Affairs, as well as the Board of Governor of the Philippine Nurses Association, Incorporated. Likewise, the Board of Director, PNA NCR Zone 2. An interesting career indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome our guest speaker, Mr. Melvin Miranda.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rene Rose Padilla. It is very much privileged that I'm invited as the resource speaker for your topic. But first and foremost, I'd like to greet the Philippine Women's University academic community, to the administrative officials, to Dean Minerva B. Diala, to Dr. De Maculangan, who continuously coordinated with me and have some updates on the progress of the webinar, especially to the PWU nursing students, our future nurses, our nurses who will be part of the healthcare delivery system of the Philippines and globally. The topic that was requested to me is all about the plight of Filipino nurses towards salary standardization. Is there a light, or is there light at the end of the tunnel? As of the moment, this has been a major issue and a challenge in our Philippine healthcare delivery system, considering the fact that here in the Philippines, it was already a law, considering the Republic Act 9173 and the Universal Healthcare Act. Nurses have definitely major role when it comes to the performance of her roles in the delivery of patient care management across varied setting in the community, hospital setting, and some specialty facilities or hospitals. Indeed, our realization is that of why Filipino nurses are still on this plight, considering of hesitancy to stay in the country, or hesitancies rather, to stay in the country and continue to work throughout their professional career. The salaries abroad, even in Southeast Asia, are very competitive compared to our country. However, the national government is pursuing its best efforts to attend to these problems and concerns about the standardization or salary standardization of nurses. With the existence of the national government, not just only the national government, local government units, other government agencies, as well as non-government and professional organizations, the collective efforts of having solutions on the plight of Filipino nurses towards salary standardization is indeed a success, which later on in my talk, I will give you the journey on how, or present to you the journey on how the salary standardization is evolving or was evolved when it comes to the law provisions until the present salary standardization law. President Rodrigo Duterte at present is very supportive of these endeavors. However, there are many factors to consider why there are some provisions that may not implement at a time. But in the Philippine Nurses Association and other nursing organizations, the specialty and the interest groups are putting all their efforts to basically address these concerns to the appropriate agency. Next slide, please. Being part of the Philippine Nurses Association, I have witnessed on how the nurses locally, in the national level, and even globally are having the advocacy to fight and to consider the improvement of the salary standardization here in the Philippines. It has been a challenge, it has been an issue, and it has been one of the agenda that by which nurses must have the positive practice environment. And Philippine Nurses Association, being a member of the International Council of Nurses, one of the advocacy and the program trust is related to positive practice environment. And Philippine Nurses Association, as a welfare organization, considers the aspect on welfare, and part of it is related to the salary standardization. Even through the years, Philippine Nurses Association and even other interest groups and specialty organizations are addressing this to the government and to some legislators who are also supporting the law. And to give you updates, even the Philippine Professional Regulation Commission, or the PRC Board of Nursing, are working hand in hand with us in PNA and also with other nursing leaders to basically address concerns on the salary standardization through the new proposed comprehensive nursing bill of the 2020, which has now been approved in the Congress. Now, in every webinar, aside from the objectives that have mentioned by our MC or Master of Ceremony, After this session, the learners will be able to, number one, contextualize the salary standardization of Filipino nurses. If we say contextualize, let us consider ourselves to be more explorative when it comes to the various factors why there are still concerns related to standardization of salary of Filipino nurses. These factors may not just merely dependent on the national government. At present, we have concerns that separates issue between the private and the government healthcare institutions, which later will be addressed accordingly and will be explained accordingly. Number two, identify laws and other provisions related to salary standardization in the Philippines. Philippine Nurses Association and other interest groups, even the specialty nursing organization and other nursing leaders, even consider this journey of putting all of this together into law. That's why even the PRC Board of Nursing are still in this endeavor to consider and improve specifically the standardization of salary of Filipino nurses. And indeed, through the technical working group who are working together, who are composed of the nursing leaders of the country, they are putting all these insights and wisdom so that this could be for the welfare of nurses in the country. Number three, when we are aware now of contextualization of the salary of the nurses or Filipino nurses here in the country, and even we are aware of the Philippine Nursing Act of Republic Act 9173, we are now moving forward. I assure you, we are moving forward through the various initiatives of the Philippine Nurses Association, even in coordination with the appropriate agencies such as Department of Health, Department of Labor and Employment, Department of Budget and Management, with the PRC Board of Nursing, and other nursing organizations. Exploring this initiative is very relevant even with situations now that the nurses are receiving already the SG15 or the salary grade 15. Issues came out last year. And with these issues, through the mediation of the Philippine Nurses Association and other interest groups and professional nursing and other specialty organizations, these agencies have been aware that there are still issues that must be addressed and provide solutions. So that's why, again, through the collective efforts, the Filipino nurses will be the one who will benefit these outcomes. Next slide, please. As I mentioned to you, the first three learning outcomes, we will explore on some of the challenges on how the nurses or the Filipino nurses nowadays are having this salary standardization. And considering the fact that in the implementation of the salary grade 15, it is based from the statistics of the salaryexplorer.com that the salary distribution among nurses are the following. So we have considered the 25%, 50%, and 75%, 100% bracket of the salary of nurses. And when it comes to the salaries of nurse salaries here in the Philippines, the range is 15,000 per month as a minimum salary to 51,900 Philippine peso per month as a maximum salary. This salary range are depending on the various factors again. The situations that we consider are if the nurse is working in a government institution, is the nurse working in a private institution? Do the local government units are basically following the implementation of the SG-15? So these are the questions that may probably have realization. Why there are nurses who may not meet the SG-15? Because in reality, various local government units, the funding has a separate issue on which if the hospital is under DOH or DOH referral or referral hospital, DOH based hospital, then the salary embeds with the national budget. If the nurse is working in a provincial, local hospitals, then it may vary specifically the budget. However, it is important to consider that Republic Act 9173 is a law. It stated there that the implementation of the SG-15 is very important. However, this realization are now addressed to the grassroots. And later on, I'll give you updates on how this basically synchronize the endeavors to improve through that's also of our nursing leaders. Next slide, please. As the salary range, we are considering the median salary. So what do you mean by the median salary? The median salary are the employees that earns in the 35,200 or less. This is in the Philippine context, ha? So based on these statistics, this was considered as a challenge before the implementation of the SG-15 because the median salary is 35,200 per month, which means on the median salary, 50% of people working as a nurse here in the Philippines are earning less than 35,200. That 35,200 does not include yet some of the deductions. Those deductions that could be PhilHealth. For the private, we have the SSS. Government, we have the GSIS and other deductions from the salary. However, even with the law of the Republic Act 9173, there are still considerations or there are still situations rather that Filipino nurses are earning below 35,200. Actually, in SG-15, we have 33,575, if I'm not mistaken, which later I'll be showing to you. So let's have the realization now. Let's contextualize the situation. Again, for nurses who are working in a premier hospital, then this could be possible. For nurses who is working in the government institution through the implementation of the SG-15, and if it is budgeted and approved by the DBM, then this is possible. One of the concerns now that we need to address are those nurses in the private institutions on how we will extend and reach them to at least improve their salary as well, or as much as we consider the same for public or for government and private institutions. So many factors are being considered. Next slide, please. Considering the range salary and the median salary, the percentile of which 25% of nurses are earning less than 22,600. So considering that 25% are nurses distributed on the national level, and 75% of them are earning more than 22,600. Now, question, who are these 25%? Who are these 75%? So as much as we want to consider the salary that could synchronize and even to all, again, one of the factors that I have mentioned is basically there are some local government units that may have limited funds. And on the national level that are budgeted, then this could support this salary standardization. So that is now our next advocacy, is to coordinate with the Department of Interior and local government on how the local government units may help enrich our nurses to implement the salary grade 15. Nowadays, when you ask nurses to consider the salary that they are receiving, for government institutions, definitely they are satisfied. For some local government units, then they are also satisfied. For private hospitals, some premier hospitals, they may address that they are satisfied. But there are some nurses in the grassroots whom we don't know if they are reaching or they belong rather to the 75%, okay, of less than 22,600. Next slide, please. When we consider the salary standardization, we are considering on the comparison by experience. When a nurse has 2 years experience or more, 2 to 5 years experience, so on and so forth, this may depend the leap of the salary based from the salary grade and rank. And this factor may vary in a government sector and in a private sector. So eventually, there is a performance evaluation if within that range of the years of experience, if you can be promoted or qualify to a higher position. But again, there are many factors to consider. It could be political. Second, it could be economical. And third, it could be social. The social is referring on how the situation itself may contribute to these concerns of salary standardization. That's why we considered standardization. We want to standardize the salary for both private and government institutions. However, when it comes to the basis of years of service, there are criteria that is being set with various healthcare institutions in both government sector and the private institutions. However, when it comes to the salary comparison by experience, this may depend for the government with the Civil Service Commission. Okay? For the private institution, if their criteria depends specifically on the years of experience, if it may take leap with their salary, then that's well and good. But again, not all hospitals are capable to meet this criteria. Next slide, please. With the years of experience that nurses are considering, let's face the reality, some of the nurses with this plight of salary standardization are leading towards working abroad after they have earned the required experience or professional experience here in the country. However, PWU future nurses, you must also take into consideration that serving the country is one of our orientation. But the plight itself of Filipino nurses sometimes gives us hesitancies to stay because of the concerns on the economic side of how you will establish professional career, and for the living. And when it comes to the comparison by, as mentioned, by the years of experience, the years of experience are very important because we are aware of our professional career pathway. When we are novice, our focus is skills development. If we are on the advanced beginner, then our focus is all about leadership. When you are on the level of proficient, competent rather, you must engage yourself into research. Then when you are about on the proficient level, then you must consider being innovative and creative. And as an expert, then you need to lead the organization. On this on this professional career pathway orientation, once you lead to this career pathway, it leads also to the upgrading of the salaries as well, because it requires higher level of expectations and skills. And with that, if you have met those competencies, then you deserve in that position, you deserve also the salary that is addressed to your, based from your rank and based from your salary grade. Now, as based from these experiences or years of experiences, you may heard sometimes that I am 10 years in service, but I'm still in Nurse 1. These are some of the address concerns during General Assembly of the Philippine Nurses Association during national conventions years back. I am in the Nurse 2, but I am not promoted because of the political concerns. Third, our salaries throughout the years are not improving because the local government unit is inhibiting, or rather not inhibiting, but basically having this realization that they cannot support funding. So these are the factors that even though we know the standards, even we know the law, okay, even it is indicated in the law, there are some limitations and factors that may affect on the standardization of salary throughout the country. Next slide, please. On the aspect of the upgrading your skills and competencies through education, in the government, once, for example, you're a novice nurse and you have already earned the years of service and experience, then when you engage yourself to a higher level of learning, which is the master's, we are now oriented with the Philippine Qualifications Framework. When you upgrade your level when it comes to education, then you deserve also to have an increase in the salary. So again, the set criteria could be varied accordingly with the government and the private sector. So making this realization that if you are working in the government, you will pursue the master's degree, the doctorate degree, because you have been oriented that it may take leap on your salaries. While when you are on the private institutions, not all, there are some who may not recognize your leap in the higher level of education and may not cause any change in the salary. So this is the one that is being assessed now by the various government agencies, specifically the PRC Board of Nursing, which the TWG, or the Technical Working Group, is working, or have worked rather, in the Comprehensive Nursing Bill of 2020, and the Philippine Nurses Association and other interest group on monitoring on how this could be synchronized, okay, for both private and government institutions. So there are some studies that arose on a situation that some of the private institution nurses are not that motivated to pursue master's degree because of the various factors. Being compared to the government sector, that they may expect a great lift, a higher lift in the salary compared to a private sector. So not all private sectors or private institutions are considering this, but there are also premier hospitals who are capable of supporting and be competitive with the salary that is aligned also with government sectors. Next slide, please. These are considered challenges because it was, according to the statistics, that the average salary increment in the Philippines is there is 8% increment rate every 20 months. So for every 8% increment rate, so it means that for the 20 months, so it's almost 2 years, okay? With almost 2 years of experience, the greater chance of the 8% increment. The next question is that of, is it a lesser percentage? Possibly it is a lesser percentage for a national level because, again, we are considering various factors. It could be internal factors or it could be external factors. Next slide. On the comparison of the Filipino nurses, actually it also indicated there the medical technologies. Philippines had been considered, as according to the News 5 Digital research team, that the Philippines has the lowest salary among the Southeast Asian countries. So why? And considering in the Southeast Asian countries, the economic level are almost the same. So various factors are also being considered. Considering and comparing with the Singapore of 236,000 per month for a registered nurse from a 40,000 here in the Philippines. The 40,000 is only the average. But if we will try to consider the statistics that we have mentioned a while ago, is we have 25% and the 75%. So the 25% receives 22,500 and 22,600 rather, up is the 75%, which it has not been identified the private and the government sector there. However, this has been a challenge for the national government and for the Filipino nurses to advocate on the salaries. With its impact on these statistics, the question is relatively a big why. Why the Philippines cannot afford to support higher than these countries. So as what I have mentioned, there are many factors to consider. And one of which is the implementation of our law. And with the implementation of our law, it continuously evolves on how it will improve our salary, the Filipino nurses' salary here in the Philippines, so that the impact of it is if we will offer a competitive salary, there could be chances that most Filipino nurses will work here in the Philippines and may decrease deployment of nurses abroad. Even during my times in the 1990s, that's the time of my college education, I have been oriented that it's pursuing a greener pasture to work abroad because of the offering when it comes to salary. And it has been applied, as what I have mentioned, by the Filipino nurses, that it has been years that why the salary of nurses are still in the middle of this plight. Now, there are many issues and concerns by which even the Civil Service Commission, the Department of Budget and Management has to address. And we must also hear their side. Okay? Because they are the ones who are aware of the national budget on how to implement it. But above these concerns and issues, the law is still the prevailing implementing policy, because this is above all these memorandas. And with this implementation, it is very important that it is standardized because it is according to law. Next slide, please. Prior to the implementation of the salary grade 15, we have the salaries, position, salary grade, and the amount itself that are being followed accordingly. The nurse one, which is salary grade 11 before, okay? The salary grade 11 is the one that has been considered in the salary standardization law, because and that the salary that follows with the salary grade 11, this is for government institution, is 22,316. This is prior to the implementation. So entry level, 22,316. And those years before the implementation of the SG-15, it's SG-11. So, but the law is already in place in 2009. And just recently, the salary grade 15 had been implemented. So, the salary grade 15 prior to its implementation is on the level of nurse 2, which is 32,000 during that time, 53. So this is now a realization of the nursing leaders addressed to the legislators, that why isn't it that the implementation of SG-15 is not in reality? So position statements had been addressed, petitions had been submitted, personal and physical lobbying of these petitions had been addressed in the Congress and the Senate. And later on, I'll give you the updates on how the journey of improving the journey of how the salary grade 15 had been implemented. So next slide, please. One of the concerns and the plight of nurses that we are experiencing is low pay, high risk. What do you mean by low pay, high risk? If we considered our situation now in public health emergency, nurses are being considered as the major frontliners in fighting COVID-19. From the promotive and preventive role to the curative and rehabilitative roles. And indeed, the high risk by which nurses or Filipino nurses here in the country are facing is they are facing at the time or at the start of the public health emergency, their priority is basically their welfare, health, and safety, and how they will cover these concerns is also a salary. The salary is also a major factor in meeting those needs. How they can have health and safety if they do not have any salary that is best to support these endeavors. However, this is the reality of nurses in the Philippines. This was an article by in the Rappler way back May 2020. Since these issues had been addressed, because during the time of 2020, the World Health Organization, even the ICN, declared that this is the year, or the 2020 is the year of the nurse. So that is a major or a great opportunity by which we could consider the welfare of nurses. So that's why most of our nursing leaders have pursued these endeavors, even through the years, last year, and even at the present. Next slide, please. As we consider the plight of Filipino nurses, we must take into consideration what is salary standardization. We are aware if we say standard, this must be the basis. It is according to the salary standardization law of the Republic Act 11466. Okay, 11466 of the Salary Standardization Law, that it established standard performance-based incentive scheme to provide rewards and bonuses to civil servants who would show exceptional performance. So, whenever you consider yourselves as having exceptional performance and meeting the minimum qualification and requirements, then if you rose from the rank, then you have also, it has also a corresponding alignment of the leap in the salary. So that's why the salary standardization law are evolving from the time of former President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, by which nurses had been identified in the implementation of the salary grade 11 until to the implementation and the salary standardization law that are being implemented in the regime of the President Rodrigo Duterte. Next slide, please. We may now proceed to the various factors of why there are concerns on the salary standardization here in the Philippines, which it took years back. It took years back on why it has not been implemented. Okay, number one factor or external factors is demand and supply of labor. There come a time before that nurses there is an increase in the supply of nurses, but decrease in demand. That is way back years ago. But in the manpower demands of the country, there are situations and years that it increases. This past 3 years or 5 years, the increase in the demand of nurses. Nowadays, even they are inhibiting the deployment of nurses because we are having or lacking or having insufficient manpower of nurses here in the country. However, most of the concerns that they have addressed is still on the common denominator about salary. Number two, as external factors, when it comes to the plight of the standardization or plight and difficulties when it comes to salary standardization, is the cost of living. For a Filipino nurse who is here in the Philippines and being head of the family, she or he may still consider on how to contribute to the welfare of their families through the monetary support. And salary, okay, salary is a major factor. However, in the cost of living, we are also considering, if we are in the private sector, if there's increase in the cost of living or the problem with inflation rate, the operations of the hospitals will be greatly affected also. Thus, this may also affect on the accounting pertaining to the allocation on budget of salaries. So this somehow have these limitations in the private sector. Number three is economic conditions. When it comes to the economic conditions, there are some presidencies before that, or presidents rather, governments position before that the salaries of the nurses have not been a priority because of the economic conditions wherein they have considered before, they have considered a problem with the infrastructure, concern on the priority of infrastructures, education. However, this has been a concern. The prevailing, we all know for a fact that the prevailing wage level varies with the national capital region and provincial. This is what I'm telling you, that the salary of nurses may differ from a provincial rate to the NCR, because this may also this may also be related or has a significant relationship on the number 2 and the number 3, which is the cost of living and the economic conditions. Number 5, society. The society itself has an influence when it comes to the salary standardization law. If the society is just silent when it comes to this aspect and not supportive of this endeavor, then this may not pursue. Because let's face it, if we will just extend our voice and address our voice only in a limited perspective, the translation of these concerns must put into law, because the law itself is the one that will be the guide of the implementers when it comes to the salary standardization law. So there are some proposed law before, or comprehensive nursing bill, that had been vetoed because of the concerns with the Philippine Hospital or Philippine Hospital Association, or rather the Private Hospital Association, that they cannot afford to have the salary grade 15 with the government institutions, because they have addressed that the private institutions or sector are dependent on their income, while the government sector have the allocated budget throughout the year for the salary of nurses. Next, number 6 is government control. As what I have mentioned, if this has not been a priority of a government, it will not pursue to address and to resolve these problems. Number 7, labor unions. The labor unions are the ones who may stand accordingly on the various provisions of law and DOLE guidelines. Now, if for example, some healthcare institutions do not have labor unions, then these nurses may not have the voice to address it to the appropriate agency or sector. For labor unions, they are the ones who represents the whole employee organization when it comes to the salaries and wages. And it has a major factor because they have the representation in the Department of Labor and Employment. Number 8, legislation. When it comes to legislation, it is very important. Even us in the Philippine Nurses Association, we are extending our efforts to lobby every issues and provisions that that may possibly integrated into a nursing bill or a nursing law, and one of which is related to the salary standardization law. At present, in coordination with the PRC Board of Nursing, they are the ones specifically have created the technical working group to address and have the insights and wisdom of the nursing leaders on how to resolve the problems with the salary standardization of the Filipino nurses. Number 9, globalization. When it comes to the globalization, at the present, many of the countries are getting or increasing the salary of nurses for them to attract nurses to apply in their country. Now, here in the Philippines, at present, we cannot compete on that level because, again, we go back to the number 3 on the economic conditions. First world country versus third world country. So, in these conditions, it boils down when it comes to the allocation of budget. So, and even the source of budget. So, as third world country, the Philippines may not support it, but as well, it must take into consideration the implementation of law. So the globalization itself supports on how the nurses will take leap when it comes to these problems on salary standardization. Number 10, cross-sector mobility. When it comes to the cross-sector mobility, there are situations that because of the difference between the salary salary schemes of the government and the private institutions, most of the nurses in the private sectors are transferring to the government institutions. Moreover, with the implementation of the salary grade 15, it supports the established salary scheme based from the law of the salary grade 15. So the mobility of nurses when it comes to this aspect is very relevant in these times. Number 11 is compensation survey. When we are going to do the benchmarking, most of the premier hospitals, private sector, can definitely compete or even align the salaries of nurses with the government sector. Because as premier hospitals, they have a lot of sources when it comes to budget allocation, specifically on the manpower salary. But for those institutions or private hospitals that may have limited sources of income, then the leap when it comes to the implementation of salary grade 15 is limited. Next slide, please. How about the internal factors? For the internal factors, it is very important to consider this is somehow how or what specific agency will monitor the private institution in the implementation of salary grade 15. For DOH hospitals, obviously the DOH can monitor this. But for the private institution, here's the reality of who will monitor. So this could be also the advocacy of the Philippine Nurses Association and the PRC Board of Nursing, by which collective efforts are being planned with the collective efforts and with the government, appropriate government agencies, whom it could help. It could be a great help when it comes to this monitoring, because compensation policy of the organization. That's why I'm telling you this, that in private institutions, they may not follow rather the salary scheme for the government institutions, because by reality they are seeing the picture, the whole picture of how their healthcare institution operates and may support specifically the salary grade 15. So which considers the number 2, which is the employer's affordability. Do the employers can afford specifically the salaries of nurses to align with the salary grade 15? Number 3 is worth of a job. So eventually, when the nurse or the nurse has major or responsibilities and functions, it must also compensate. So that's the worth of a job, which the internal factors might take into consideration. Next is employees' worth. When it comes to the employees' worth as internal factors, when it comes to the employee compensation, the loyalty of the employee or the nurse may continue, and quality service could be the impact. However, this could be other factors that may consider if we are not promoting positive practice environment, specifically also on the salary schemes that are not improving, then this may affect specifically motivation of our Filipino nurses or nurses. Number 5, the organization ability to pay. So again, it boils down again with the operations and the income status of the institution, if they can afford and they are capable of paying such. And number 7 is employee-related factors. So most probably, as what I've told you, there are some nurses who are addressing that they are still in the same position throughout the years. They are not being considered to be on this promotion. And we know that once they have been promoted, it may follow through with the salary scheme. So these are the external and internal factors. We may not just only take into consideration that why salary standardization are not in place. Do the government is not doing their efforts? No, they are also doing their efforts. However, we are considering the external and internal factors. But because of the presence of the nursing leaders in the country, with the PRC Board of Nursing, with the accredited professional organization, which is the Philippine Nurses Association, and with the support of the specialty and the interest groups, we are pursuing the more collective efforts, the greater chances that it may pursue a leap when it comes to these provisions. Next slide, please. Now I will be showing to you the journey of how the Philippine Nurses Association is moving, or had moved rather, to this salary standardization. And I may declare also, I may have a disclaimer here to credit Dr. Teresita Barcelo, because most of the slides that I will be presenting to you came from her during her presentation in the PNA Kapihan, May 1, 2021. Also, with my courtesy to our Philippine Nurses Association President, Governor Melvin Reyes, and to Governor Alpon Guillier, our BPPD, for allowing me to have this presentation in connection with our topic for this morning. In 2003, so let's go back to 2003. In 2003 to 2016, there is already a representation from the Philippine Nurses Association. So it was already an agenda in the Philippine Nurses Association on how it will address concerns with the salary way back 2003. And with this 2003 to 2016, we are very successful when it comes to our representation, the PNA representation, to DOH requesting the provisions of the salary grade 15 as stated in the Republic Act 9170, that's 9172. Okay? In 2017, the Philippine Nurses Association, with the help of our Undersecretary of Department of Health, Yusek Roger Tong-an, exerted the effort to ask the Department of Budget and Management to implement the ruling that was done. The ruling was done. Okay? So 2003 to 2016, we are continuously lobbying these concerns of the salary grade 15 and the implementation of the law as well through the Department of Health. Why the Department of Health? Because when it comes to the implementation, the nurses is under them, and there must be a coordination with the DBM. Now, in the 2017, the Yus Tong-an, being in the Department of Health, have addressed this concern and exerted effort to the Department of Budget and Management. So next slide, please. As it goes with our journey on the action of the Philippine Nurses Association, in 2009, the PR Board of Nursing with Philippine Nurses Association with other stakeholders, those stakeholders are those who supported the PR Board of Nursing and other nursing leaders as well, with created another technical working group to work on the legislative bill to repeal the 9172. Okay, repeal the 9172, which added, okay, the provision that the salary grade 15 had been must be in place, must be part of the provision for both private and government institution. So can you imagine that it has been a proposed bill before to consider both private and government institution to have salary grade 15 for both sectors. Next slide. From the 2009, the comprehensive nursing law that never came. So why is it? As mentioned by Dr. Barcelo, it succeeded in having another comprehensive nursing bill that have been approved by the Congress in 2016. That's the Republic Act 5592. Okay? The Republic Act 5592 was submitted to the Malacanang for the signing of President Benigno Aquino, and once it is signed, it will be put into law. However, and unfortunately, in June 2016, President Aquino vetoed the Republic Act 5592, which I have mentioned that the salary grade 15 will be the same for both private and government sector. Next slide, please. On this journey, let's think of the reason why it was vetoed. Okay? So, obviously, it was not put into law. So, the Republic Act 9173 at present is still considering the SG 15 for government sector. And with this proposed Republic Act, the reason that it has been vetoed is the provision of salary of nurses stating that the minimum should not be lower than salary grade 15 for both government and private facilities. So, probably you might think why President Benigno Aquino have considered the vetoing of, or vetoed rather, that proposed bill. And here comes another side of the story. Next slide, please. With the supposedly Republic Act 5592 that have been vetoed, the Philippine Private Hospital, okay, the Philippine Private Hospital Association. So I stand corrected, it's not the Philippine Hospital Association, but it is the Philippine Private Hospital Association. They proposed to veto the law on the perspective that the SG 15, including the private hospitals, cannot afford the increase. Okay? So I have addressed and mentioned the discussion of the internal and the external factors, right? And those factors have been considered by the Philippine Private Hospital Association. So since the PPHA rather have lobbied this, and it was heard by the President Aquino. So, the proposed Republic Act 5592 that has provision of SG 15 to be implemented in the private and the government sector had been vetoed because of these reasons. Next slide. Now, it's not yet the end of the journey. In 2015, the NARS party list Congress Representative Dr. Leia Primitiba Pakis filed a case in the Supreme Court against these agencies, Department of Health, DBM, and Executive Secretary, asking for the immediate implementation on the provision of Republic Act 9173 on salary grade 15. Because during that time, we have a representation in the Congress through the Representative Dr. Leia Primitiba Pakis. That's why it is very important that it is actually a key significance that we have a nurse representative in the legislative body, which is Congress. Because, again, if our issues and challenges will not be put into legislation or into law, it may not have a strong implementation. And since Dr. Pakis have initiated this to the Supreme Court, then let's see how it progressed through the years. Next slide, please. As the fight in the Supreme Court continues, in 2019, the Philippine nurses supported the case filed by Dr. Leia Pakis by also submitting the petition to the Supreme Court supporting the NARS case. So what is the NARS case? It's supporting the implementation of the SG 15. And on October 8, 2019, the Supreme Court ruling came in stating the validity of the provisions. So can you imagine that in the October 8, 2019, it has been stated by the Supreme Court the validity of the provisions in our law on the implementation of salary grade 15. But again, during that time, it continued the journey on how it will be implemented accordingly, because again, the government and concerned agency must put efforts because it is already a Supreme Court ruling. Next slide, please. When it comes to this ruling that have been addressed by the Supreme Court in the GAA for 2020, there is now a concern by which the Philippine Nurses Association continues the fight in Congress. This GAA for 2020 has already passed the lower house when the Supreme Court ruling came. So the Philippine Nurses Association lobbied at the Senate, which deliberated on the passage of the GAA, where the Department of Health budget was contained. So this is somehow in relation to the implementation of the Supreme Court ruling of the SG-15. So what happened next? Next slide, please. As it continues the fight in Congress, Dr. Erlinda Castor Palaganas, who was the president of the Philippine Nurses Association that time in 2019, and with the very dynamic advisor, Dr. Teresita Barcelo, who is also the former PNA president, lobbied with the senators for the inclusion of the increase in the salary of nurses in government, the hospitals, as stated in the Supreme Court ruling. Because even the Supreme Court have issued this in October 8, it must continue, okay? It must continue the support with the Senate as well when it comes to implementation. Because specifically, if it is in the provision of the Republic Act 9173, how the concerned agencies will act on it. So the Senate is very important. The senators are very significant when it comes to the implementation. And so it continues through the efforts of Dr. Erlinda Palaganas and Dr. Barcelo to Senators Lacson, Villar, and Angara, to name few, strongly in support of our course. Now, Senator Lacson said that the 2020 budget of the DOH can absorb the needed funds to implement salary grade 15, because that is one of the major issues that the DOH and the DBM have addressed, that it is not in the boundaries or in the provisions of the allocated budget. However, with the review of the senators, the 2020 budget of the DOH have addressed that it can absorb the needed funds of the implementation of the salary grade 15. The Supreme Court ruling was October 2019. In the 2020, still January, February, and March, it has not been yet implemented. However, in the 2020, it gave us light for the nurses because the 2020 GAA was passed with the provision to implement salary grade 15. It means that the concerned agencies must act on it to implement the salary grade 15 because on the basis of the Supreme Court ruling. Next slide. With these situations of lobbying in the Senate, we can now move forward. In 2020, it was addressed the adjustment of the salaries of nurses. Nurse 1, Nurse 2, Nurse 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now, the salary grade 15, as from the provision of the Republic Act 9173, has set for the government sector only, by which the salary grade 15 for Nurse 1, remember with our discussion, the salary grade 11 before with the 22,000 plus are based from the salary standardization law. Now with the newly implemented salary standardization law, including our nurses, it benefited the adjustment of the Nurse 1 from 22,000 to the supposed salary grade 15 of 32,053. So now it is now being implemented. Okay, it's now being implemented. So during the time, Nurse 2 is salary grade 17, Nurse 3 is salary grade 19, Nurse 4 is salary grade 20, and Nurse 5 is salary grade 22, and we had the salary grade 2024. However, there are still issues that arose from this situation. Why? Because if there will be new nurses on the entry level, and for those who are in the nurse one, okay, nurse one who is an existing employee or nurse working in the hospital, they will have the same, okay, they will have the same salary grade. And since as according to the Department of Budget and Management, the one that they could implement primarily is the nurse one, because it was indicated in the law that the salary grade 15 is not clearly stated in the provision that it will consider the higher ranks. So the DBM have considered the nurse one only to have the adjustment. So meaning, remember in the salary standardization law that I have presented, the nurse 2 has the same salary grade 15. So meaning, for the nurse 2, when the new nurse enters nurse 1 and they have salary grade 15, they will have the same salary with the nurse 2. So they somehow they feel demotivated. This is what they have mentioned. They feel demotivated. They feel that it's a demotion. So this had been addressed accordingly. And the Philippine Nurses Association and other interest groups are also in support of this, because this was addressed by the nurses as well. Next slide, please. So in this year, just recently, because of the efforts of the Philippine Nurses Association in collaboration with the PRC Board of Nursing, with the agencies such as the Department of Health, with other groups also continuously, with the ANGNARS and with the Philippine Nurses United, also with other nursing organization. Now the DBM already welcomes the upgrade of nurse to salary grade and retain the nursing position titles. So meaning now that nurse 1 will be salary grade 15, nurse 2 will be now salary grade 16. So there is now a difference between the nurse 1 and the nurse 2. The next question is, how about the nurse 3, 4, 5, and 6? As of the moment, there are no adjustment with the nurse 3 to 6. They just initially, for the meantime, to focus on the concern of the nurse 2. So probably in the future, we will get there. We will get there. But what is important now, next slide, please. What is important now is we are moving forward, okay? We're moving forward because the Department of Budget and Management already released a circular. Next slide. A circular which eventually will be the basis of the implementation of the salary grade 16 for nurse 2. Okay, so this has been a great achievement of our nursing leaders who have exerted effort to put this into action. So it's collective efforts. And moving forward, the proposed nursing bill could be another solution on the salary standardization. Second is we are now pursuing our plans when it comes to the welfare of nurses in the private sector. As we move forward, next slide please. Let's go back with our learning outcomes if I have met your expectations. In the contextualization and the salary of standardization of Filipino nurses, I have presented to you on how it evolved, some of the provisions of law, who are those personalities, and specifically the reality of the Filipino nurses' salary here in the Philippines. With this presentation of realization, it moved the various agencies and the Philippine Nurses Association, the ANGNARS, and other agencies to specifically identify of what on how it will be translated into law. So that's why it will continue the journey on number 2, that in the implementation of the Republic Act 9173 in support of the SG-15, it was a success because it has been implemented now for SG-15. The next consideration is to consider the private sector sooner or later, and how to have additional incentives for our nurses. And when it comes to exploring the initiatives I have presented to you on how the various sectors, including the Philippine Nurses Association, supported on how to consider the salary standardization to be one of the key trust of the welfare organization, and having the program trust in promoting the positive practice environment with you, future nurses, and with the Filipino nurses in the national level and globally, can be a great help so that this could be implemented. So thank you very much, and I hope I have met your expectation. Thank you.
If you have anything to say or questions to ask, our floor is now open to our open forum, so feel free to type in your questions in our comment section below to our Facebook live stream. So we have one question from one of our student nurse. Her question is, for many years, Filipino nurses had been leaving the country after failed attempts of fighting for higher wages and better working conditions. Are we encouraging Filipino nurses to work where they can be appreciated, paid, and not overworked? If so, is the Philippines one of those countries who can support Filipino nurses or healthcare workers in the near future?
Actually, yes. With the support of the national government and with the existence of our agencies that represents nurses to address these concerns, such as the PRC Board of Nursing, the Philippine Nurses Association as accredited professional organization, and other specialty and interest nursing groups, we will continuously lobby everything, address petitions, as to support the implementation of this salary grade 15. However, when it comes to the deployment of our nurses and who wish to work abroad, we cannot prevent them to work abroad. However, as an advocate of the positive practice environment, that's why our focus now on the welfare is the salary standardization of our Filipino nurses. It may come a time in the future that the Filipino nurses will not anymore work abroad, and they could be satisfied with the implementation of our salaries here in the Philippines. But again, as what I have told you, it must be translated into law. That's why we are exerting efforts to put this into provisions and hoping in the future it will be translated into law. Thank you.
We have another question, sir, from one of our student
Sure.
nurses again. So, President Rodrigo Duterte signed the salary standardization law that would increase the take-home pay of government employees, including nurses, starting January 1, 2020. The increase is around 1,500, which is relatively insignificant for someone raising and supporting a family. So how was the decision to increase the salary by 1,500 reasonable? What can you say about that?
Actually, it's not the 1,500, but basically aligning what has been indicated in the salary grade 15. As what I have presented a while ago, although for the meantime, our law are basically implementing for the government sectors of our nurses. Now, when it comes to the leap, when it comes to the salary, as what I have mentioned before, the nurse one, okay, the nurse one is salary grade 11 according to the salary standardization law, which is 22,500 plus. Now, with the implementation of the salary standardization law under the President Rodrigo Duterte, it leaped accordingly the nurse 1 to salary grade 15, which is 32,000 plus. So it took almost 10,000 leap of the increase rather of the salary. And what supported that matter of the increase in the salary is based from the what has been stipulated in the law, which, as I have mentioned, the other concerns that have addressed, as what I have mentioned a while ago, are those nurses from nurse 2 up. So they have the same. So that's why we have acted and addressed this to the appropriate agencies to support the solution for the nurse 2. And luckily, just recently, the DBM supported that the nurse 2 will be what? Will be on the salary grade 16, which also have a which has also a difference when it comes to the salary of nurse 1. So when it comes to the mention of 1,500, so it aligned already to what is stipulated in the law and what is according to the salary grade from the DBM.
Thank you, sir. So for our last question, what can Filipino nurses look forward to in the next 5 to 10 years based on this situation?
Moving forward, so as what I have mentioned, the one that had been stipulated in the provision of the law is salary grade 15 for government sector. Moving forward is to involve or to include already the private sector. That's why in the comprehensive nursing bill, it is one of our endeavors. And we will not stop even this will be vetoed. We will not stop to still fight for the welfare of the nurses and give what they deserve. And what we deserve as nurses is based, which if it could be translated into law, it will be strongly implemented if primarily as nurses will support this proposed comprehensive nursing bill. Because once we support the comprehensive nursing bill and put this into law, it will be a strong implementation that everyone must follow, government and private sector. So the key benefits or beneficiaries of these endeavors are our nurses. So future nurses, once you become registered nurses, please support all these endeavors because these are all for the welfare of Filipino nurses. Maraming salamat.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you so much, Mr. Melvin Miranda, for all of the updates about our status of our salary standardization here in the Philippines. Right now, Dr. Celeste A. Di Maculangan, the webinar advisor, will present the e-certificate to the guest speaker.
The Philippine Women's University School of Nursing Certificate of Appreciation is proudly presented to Melvin Miranda for being a nurse advocate and sharing his valuable time and knowledge on the webinar entitled The Plight of Filipino Nurses Towards Salary Standardization. Is there light at the end of the tunnel? Via Facebook Live streaming. Given this 21st day of June, in the year of our Lord 2021 at the Philippine Women's University. Signed, Dr. Celeste de Maculangan, Professor, School of Nursing. Dr. Minerva de Ala, Dean, School of Nursing.
Maraming salamat po.
Ms. Tessa May Salsas, the overall today's activity.
Dr. Celeste de Maculangan, the webinar advisor, Mr. Melvin Miranda, our distinguished speaker, faculty members, friends, and students, good afternoon. The nursing profession is an integral part of the healthcare system, encompasses the promotion of health, prevention of illness, and care of patients in all healthcare settings. In the fight against the pandemic, nurses took the center stage as one of the frontliners, thus risking their lives. Within this broad spectrum of healthcare, the phenomena of particular concern of nurses in the Philippines is the salary standardization, and it is fitting to ask this question, is there light at the end of the tunnel? With what nurses have shown in terms of their duties and responsibilities, this past 1 year and 3 months of the pandemic, the people in the government position should have noticed and recognized the pivotal role of nurses. My gratitude to the resource speaker for his time and his sharing on what is happening in his advocacy. Before I finally end, I would like to express my gratitude and thanks to the entire webinar working committees, our professor in leadership and management for guiding us in this event, as well as the ICT and multimedia staff for their unwavering support throughout this endeavor. Once again, thank you so much for spending the time with us. God bless everyone and keep safe.
May I remind you all to fill out the evaluation form that it is in our slide right now. We have provided the link and as well as the QR code. It will be closed by 200 hour or 10 p.m. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of the people behind this webinar. Our working committee is headed by Dr. Celeste de Macalangan, our advisor. Working committees, Lourdes Cabatuan, Robert F. Thomas, and Mr. Him Manabat for the video and publicity, Mr. Vladimir E. Villamor, Mr. Tito Pelago, and Mr. Isagani Luis Castro for PW Multimedia Broadcasting Team, Dr. Menchita Dumlao, Mr. Michael George Ventanilla, and Mr. Manuel Cuban for Google Meet support. For our overall chairman, we have Ms. Tessa May Salsas, Chair Ms. Christine Caballero, Assistant Program Chair Ms. Melcy Detsunga, Registration Ms. Saoshan Lee, Evaluation Mr. John Kunzu and Ms. Hazel Shanko, Documentation Mr. Yongyi Wan and Ms. Hazel Shanko. Introduction for the guest speaker, we have Ms. Rene Rose Padilla. Open forum, we have Ms. Ulrika Regis. And thank you for having this opportunity to be your host for today. For more information and updates on our event and activities of the School of Nursing, you may like and follow our students' Facebook page, W School of Nursing. To all the participants and virtual audiences, thank you so much for being here with us, for joining and participating in today's webinar. We hope to see you all again in upcoming webinars. Please stay safe, always wash your hands, and don't forget your face masks and your face shields, and always practice social distancing. Thank you and have a great day.